opinions given throughout this video are my own, you guys. If you don't agree, that is 100% okay. That's what makes having opinions so fun, is that we can disagree. We don't have to agree on everything. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name's Lisa if you are new here, and I love to make lifestyle videos and booktube videos. I absolutely love romantasy. I feel like this is obviously like a very popular genre lately, and I love that it's getting so many people back into reading. I think it's so fun that so many of us are big readers now, and I love that there's this community online of people who can share their love for stories and also help each other discover new stories. There's so many good books out there that it's like, it's criminal. Sometimes I think of my TBR. I think I have over 250 books in my TBR, and I'm like, my TBR is basically gonna be endless. It's gonna be never ending. I'm never gonna be able to make it through. The fact that I can't read every story in the world just breaks my heart. In today's video, I want to talk about the more popular titles that are getting circulated over on BookTok, specifically in the romantasy genre. I'm gonna tell you guys if I personally think they are worthy of the hype that they get online, or if I maybe think they are slightly too overhyped and maybe not so deserving of the hype that they get. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below if you're not already, and join our fam here on YouTube. Also, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up so I know that you guys are vibing with these types of videos. Okay, we're gonna start with one that might be extremely controversial. Powerless. I'm not gonna lie, BookTok got me with this one. It was obviously marketed as like hella enemies to lovers, which... So I had high hopes for this one. Now, granted, an 18-year-old wrote this, okay? That in itself is like very impressive. I truly believe that the reason this book blew up so much on BookTok is because a bunch of 13-year-old girls picked it up and were vibing with it. I'm not saying that if you're not a 13-year-old girl, you could not enjoy this book. I'm not saying that at all. But I truly believe the reason that this book blew up to what it did and that it gets the hype that it gets is because it has a much younger demographic of readers. Little rundown of the book Powerless. There are the elites and there are the ordinaries. The elites have magical abilities, ordinaries do not. The story follows Peyton, who is an ordinary, but she's posing as a psychic, so she's posing as an elite that has magical abilities. She basically encounters one of the princes of Elia named Kai, and she actually ends up saving his life in like an altercation in the streets. And because of that, she ends up being elected as one of the members of a trial that takes place, the purging trials, which essentially are trials that like showcase the elite's powers, and then there's like a winner. It's basically like Hunger Games. She gets thrown into it as an ordinary, and so she has to like fight her way to the finish line. Extra hard because she's actually an ordinary and she doesn't actually have any abilities like the other contestants do. My main beef with this book, and I'm pretty sure it's been repeated online consistently, is that to me I just felt like I was reading a mashup of books. I didn't feel like there was really anything original in here. And look, I get with books, we're all kind of inspired by one another, ideas from other books that we've consumed and like read as writers. I totally get that, but this book felt like the Hunger Games, and for me also Harry Potter. There's like a maze trial at the very end, and to me it was just giving Harry Potter. Like when I was reading this, I was like, this is fully taken from like the fourth Harry Potter. She is very much giving Katniss Everdeen with her bow and arrow. Yeah, it felt very much like they were just stolen ideas in that sense. I know there's a lot of criticism with this book because apparently even more than the Hunger Games or Harry Potter, it's like a carbon copy of a book called Red Queen, which I have not actually read this book, so I did not know that when I was reading Powerless. But essentially it's quite literally the exact same plot. The author of this book has quite literally said on her socials that this book was inspired by Red Queen, so I think that's why a lot of people were coming for her. It got really bad when the author of Red Queen was literally accused of plagiarizing Powerless, even though Red Queen came out like years ago. I personally would have lost it as an author. I felt like the author of Red Queen kept it really like classy and dealt with the whole controversy very well. But yeah, there's been like a lot of drama with Powerless. I read the second book. I probably will be reading the third as well. It's entertaining. I'm not gonna lie, in our book club meeting, the girls were hating on this book, and I low-key rated it higher than almost all the other girls because I was kicking my feet and giggling like a little schoolgirl. If you just go into this book with like lower expectations and you're just there for the vibes and not the quality of the writing writing or really like the storyline, you were gonna eat this book right up. But in terms of if I think this book deserves the hype that it has and if it's worthy of the hype that it has over on BookTok, unfortunately I'm gonna have to say no. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. This book basically follows Oriah, who is a human who was adopted by a vampire king. She basically lives in a world amongst vampires and like they all just want to kill her. So she enters a tournament called the Kajari. This is another tournament-based duology. When you win the Kajari, you are granted one wish of your choosing. So she finds herself amongst these trials and unfortunately ends up in a situation where she needs to trust this vampire named Rain, who is like dangerous, and she doesn't know if she can fully trust him, but she has no choice. At one point she has no choice but to make an alliance with him and trust him. This is a very highly regarded duology on BookTok. I personally really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed equally the second book as well. I do think a lot of people who enjoyed this first book did not like the second book as much, which is fair. I personally really enjoyed both of them equally. There's also a massive plot twist at the end of this book that I just did not see coming, and a lot of people did not vibe with it. I personally did. I was like eating it up and just freaking the hell out. I literally had to like do a little pause, like, oh my god. You know, one of those where you're just like, you need to take a step back and give yourself a second to process what's happening. It was one of those books. For me, Serpent and the Wings of Night, if it's overhyped, it's like slightly overhyped, but I do think it deserves the love that it received. It's like a very entertaining book. Next, we are talking about the Caraval series. You guys have probably heard of this book. It is literally all over BookTok. This particular book follows Scarlet and her sister Tella. Basically, their father arranges a marriage for Scarlet, and she is not about that, so she's desperate to get away from this tiny island that she lives on with her sister and her father. So once a year, there's a performance called Caraval that takes place in a remote location where the participants of the show are the show pretty much, and like you can participate in it if you get invited. Essentially, they do get invited to Caraval. They end up going. They are whisked away into this magical show. Once they reach the location of where Caraval is taking place, Tella goes missing almost instantly by the mastermind behind Caraval named Legend. What we find out is that the goal of this year's Caraval is to find Tella, and whoever finds Tella first wins. So Scarlet obviously has to partake because she wants to save her sister. She has to keep reminding herself that things are just a game, nothing is as it seems, but the lines start to blur and she starts to fall into this world of Caraval and things start to get a little bit weird. I had a lot of fun reading Caraval. I'm not gonna lie, it's a trilogy. I prefer the second and third book a lot more, which follow the sister Tella. This first book follows Scarlet, who I personally didn't love. Like, I didn't dislike her as a character, but I just didn't love her as a character. I thought she was a little bit bland and boring personally. I know a lot of people do like her. I do feel like this series in general was slightly overhyped on BookTok. Regardless, it's still a very fun and unique world, and I had a lot of fun reading it. Like, I still really enjoyed myself. It's not my favorite trilogy. It's not even close to being my favorite trilogy, but I do really think this is like a fun read. Which brings me to the next series, which is the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. So essentially, one of the characters who pops up in the second book of Caraval, named Jax, ends up getting his own trilogy in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. This story basically follows a girl named Evangeline, who is like the sweetest, most gentle main character you will ever meet. She's like, yes, I believe in happy endings and I believe in true love. She finds out basically that the absolute love of her life is marrying someone else. So she's desperate to stop the wedding, and as she does that, she goes to Jax, the immortal Prince of Hearts, and she strikes a deal with him. Obviously, things go very, very wrong because the Prince of Hearts is not a good guy and he's a little trickster. When he meets Evangeline, he basically uses her for his own benefit and things end up getting pretty messy. I swear when I'm talking about it like that, the premise of the book doesn't sound that entertaining, but I enjoyed this series a lot more than the Caraval series, and I know a lot of people would agree on that. Jax for me is one of the most likable villains I think I've read in a book. He is just so funny and sassy. I am usually not rooting for the blondes, okay, but I'm rooting for Jax. I was rooting for Jax even in the Caraval series. I definitely recommend it. Is it as hyped as what people make it out to be? Unpopular opinion? No, and I would suggest going into it with a little bit less expectations than like what people put on it. yeah, I was thoroughly entertained with this series. Now I will say, if you're going to read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, I would strongly suggest reading the Caraval series first. And I say that because I think you will actually enjoy this series a lot more if you read this one first. I know a lot of people who read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series either first or they just never ended up reading Caraval, and I feel like they do not get the full experience. I will die on this hill. You need to meet Jax in Caraval before you read about Jax in Once Upon a Broken Heart. And you're going to enjoy Jax as a character a lot more when you read about him in Caraval first. Caraval does take place before the Once Upon a Broken Heart series does. So again, when there is the overlap of characters, which you do, you get the characters from Caraval in Once Upon a Broken Heart at times, they cross over. It's just gonna make so much more sense because you read it in order. Let's talk about ACOTAR, you guys. So everyone and their mother has read ACOTAR, okay? Everyone and their literal freaking mother. These are very entertaining books, but the reason they're as hyped as they are on BookTok is because it's the first book most people have picked up in a hot minute. Most people have not picked up a book in years, and then they started picking up ACOTAR because everyone was hyping it up, and that is why it is so hyped. So obviously, they're really going to enjoy these books. They are entertaining books. I have this hypothesis that the first fantasy series that you read in your adult life ends up being your favorite just because you have like that emotional attachment, and it's like the first world that's like bringing you into this fantasy world. I truly believe that theory, honestly, because for me, the first fantasy series that I read, I'm in love with. It's one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it. I really had a lot of fun with this series. I dived into the world. I was thoroughly entertained. I'm not even gonna go into what this book is about, because I feel like everyone knows. It is worthy of like hype that it gets, but I do think it is obviously way overhyped. And personally, I liked it when I read it because it was a lot less popular 2.5, 3 years ago. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm one of those people, when a book gets like so overhyped, I get over it. That's just how I am. It's a good book. It's a great series. It's entertaining. I had a lot of fun reading it, and I'm gonna leave that there. And then the last series that I want to talk about in this video is Fourth Wing, of course. Fourth Wing, again, everyone and their mother is reading this series. I really enjoyed Fourth Wing when I read it. I really enjoyed the first book. I thought it was a lot of fun. I loved the school aspect of it. I really liked the dynamics, obviously, between Violet and Xaden. The second one, I didn't enjoy as much. The cliffhanger it ended on in the second one, I don't know if I was sold, to be honest. Like, I don't know if I just like where the story is heading. I will read the third book eventually. I'm not in a rush. We'll see where it goes. I will give it a chance. I do understand why it's as popular as it is. Very similar to ACOTAR. I feel like a lot of people have picked up Fourth Wing as like their first fantasy book that they've picked up in a while. So again, I understand growing very attached to the first fantasy series that you're reading. Is it 100% worth the hype that it receives? Probably not. It's entertaining. I don't think you're gonna be disappointed if you read it. I don't know anyone who like absolutely despised Fourth Wing. Like, they were just like, it was okay, or like, yeah, I liked it. I don't know anyone who absolutely hated it. It's an entertaining world. But again, is it worthy of all the hype? Honestly, I feel like I said some of them were. Maybe unpopular opinion, I think all books are a little bit maybe too overhyped. So I always like to try my best to go into a reading experience with as little expectation as possible, or as blindly as possible. That way I can make the judgment call for myself and figure out how I really feel about it without other people altering my opinions. Like, if I'm going into it thinking like, okay, all of these other people liked it and they liked some of the other books that I've enjoyed, and then I end up putting too much emphasis on like wanting to love the book, so the experience is basically altered because I'm like putting all this expectation on it. Do you know what I mean? I had a lot of fun making this video, you guys. Let me know in the comments if you think any of these books are overhyped and not deserving of the attention they get on BookTok, or if there's any other popular romantasy series that you love and that you think are deserving of the hype that it gets. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up for me. That would make my day, as well as hit that subscribe button down below if you have not already, and join our fam here on YouTube. I love you guys so much, and I will see you very, very soon with another new video. Bye.